As humans, we have a pretty good understanding that listening to one another is something that is not just useful, but necessary. So my question is, how do we then expand that out beyond the human realm? What might we learn from that? Before 275 million years ago, the Earth had no song. As far as we can tell from the fossil record and from looking at evolutionary trees and all the other scientific methods that people use these days, insects were the first creatures on land to give voice, to produce song. Song is a deliberate production of sound to advertise one's presence, maybe to mates or to warn off predators. In listening to the sounds of insects, we get a direct sensory connection to a primal Earth. The real twist in the story is that in a way we owe our own voices and hearing to those early insects. When our ancestors first came onto land, they could hear low-frequency sounds, particularly that came up through their bodies through bone conduction. But higher-frequency sounds, like the sounds I'm using now to speak, they had no way of perceiving those in their world. Then suddenly, these insects start calling. And if you're an amphibian, reptile-like creature way back 275 million years ago, that's a protein snag. If you go right back to the origin of our higher frequency hearing, it coincides exactly with when insects started singing. And then when we start hearing in those higher ranges, then, well, we start communicating. In listening to very ordinary sounds today, the sounds of crickets and katydids, we in a way come to understand our own evolution a little more clearly. And we also understand that although we may think of ourselves as separate, the act of speaking, of listening to one another is bound up in layers of interconnection and contingency with ancient singing crickets and our ancient ancestors hundreds of millions of years ago. So when we listen to any animal's song, and birds are a particularly effective way of doing this, we can ask, how does this song fit into its environment? For example, among birds who live in forests have a problem getting their song through the forest, because as the sound waves flow, they bounce off of every leaf and every tree trunk and twig, and there's all this reverberation that gets added to the sound. But if I were a bird trying to communicate rather precise information through my song, that's a problem. And so birds in forests have slow, whistled songs. Birds in the open prairie don't have those constraints. So they sound very virtuosic. They have all these trills and frequency sweeps and so on. Listening to the world as if the world were a concert that you'd bought a $100 ticket to is a great way of opening to first of all, the physical experience, but then what forms of beauty do I just not understand? Like, what was that bird? I want to identify, give the bird a name and learn some of its story. And for me, that's the sort of proselytizing part of teaching, if you like. 50 years and 100 years when I'm dead and gone, will those sounds still be here? We don't know. And if we haven't paid attention, what are we going to tell the future? So for me, listening is a way of giving a gift to the future. When somebody asks, what was the sound of spring back in 2025? And I'll have a story to tell them, rather than just letting all my news come to me through the algorithms that, of course, we know are now very manipulative. Instead, we can listen and get our news directly from the source, from the Living Earth community.